Hey, hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Let's Make Sense. I'm Ivan.
And I'm Jian Wei.
Okay, so Let's Make Sense is a mini podcast series which we will impart our financial knowledge and help everyone to make better financial decisions. Through our episode, we also will invite guests from different walks of life to share about their different life experience and also their own personal finance journey. Through their stories, we will then uncover the importance of better financial planning and also any actionable tips and tricks you can make in your life. So Jian Wei, who do we have today and what are we going to talk about today?
Yep, so today we have a guest, right? She's also a podcaster, so she has recorded a few episodes already, so if you want, you can go and check out her episodes. And she is also one of the more financially savvy person that I know.
Compliment.
So she's Alison, so maybe I'll do a quick self-introduction of yourself.
Hi everyone, I'm Alison. So like Jian Wei mentioned, I also have my own podcast. You can check it out at the Alison Pod. I'm a marketer by day, so I'm currently doing digital marketing, social media marketing. So I don't think I'm very financially savvy. I'm just a little bit more auntie. I'm a little bit more, I like to search for like saving deals and what I can use, like what credit cards I can use to make the best of my money. So I guess that comes across as being financially savvy. I guess that's a compliment. Yeah, thank you so much for having me on Let's Make Sense as well.
Yeah, so today's topic, right, just going to dive right into the topic today. So we're going to talk about sandwich generation. So it's not an unfamiliar term really. A lot of people have been talking about it. So maybe you can quickly run through what is this thing about, right? Basically, it's like your top layer, right? It's like your parents. So they need to rely on their children, which is us, like 20s to 30s, right, for retirement. So we are the middle layer. And then next time, if we were to have kids, right, then we are the bottom layer. So we need to support our kids also. So actually, right, what do you all think about this like kind of phenomenon? Is it a very Asian thing, or what are your thoughts about this?
When you say it's an Asian thing, I think I totally agree. A lot of times, I think back in traditional history, families have a lot of kids because they feel like, the more I spread my risk, the more kids I have, the higher chances they would help me. And also because, with more kids, they can help me with farming, back when we were in like the primary agricultural stages. So I think that kind of mindset actually passes down. Even now when we have lesser kids, they still have that mindset and they do expect, once they start working, my investments start to pay off. They will have to start repaying for whatever money I pumped into their childhood, their education, etc. So I think it is Asian concept, but I mean I can't speak for it because I'm Asian, so yeah.
Yeah, Ivan, what do you think?
Wow, I agree. I think it's a very Asian mindset where like you want your child to actually support for you, and then and I think parents okay, maybe not our generation parents maybe the older generation, right, will think that like what you mentioned, I have a lot of kids, right, then I don't have to plan for my retirement, so everybody give me like let's say few $100, I can actually sustain it throughout already. So then it actually a much better way than need to save, need to do this kind of thing. So I think it's really the Asian mindset. But I think in coming days, then we bring it back to the current days, right? Now I think people are more aware of it, and then I think parents are also not really very dependent because I think standard of living increase, their wage increase or whatever. So I think then they start to be like, oh, you can just do yourself, because they do know that my kids have their grandkids to look after. So yeah, so I think nowadays people tend to be a bit more cautious about it, or more prepared and aware about it.
Right.
But do you think it's something that the kids should take on the responsibility to have that open communication rather than feel like, okay, it's an ongoing phenomenon, you should know? As parents, you should know that I'm going to be sandwiched.
Well, but I think that's a very good question. Because I feel that then again we draw back to Asian culture, right? There's not much of a communication, or this type of things very sensitive to talk about. Especially if let's say you talk about allowance money, yes. Allowance for parents also. It's very difficult to open, ask your parents
how much
how much you want for money allowance, yeah. Right? Then they will say, 随便你. Then you will be thinking okay, 200 is it more than 300 that kind. So I think like in that sense, money is a very sensitive topic, or money is not a widely talked about topic in Asian culture. So I think communication really helps further. But I think it's really to have a sit down session and talk to your parents and say, okay, you know, now is the age for us to go into retirement for you. What is the next step of action that you have? I think it's a good start lah. But I think the conversation shouldn't just stop there. I think it should just continue and say that, okay, well, what is the next 20 years you're going to do, that kind.
Right.
Yeah.
I think it's if I'm an old gen parent, right, I will totally do this. Because it's like a basically you get it's a very sick retirement plan.
Yeah.
So you got your kids to support you, right? It's even better than CPF life. You got kids for life and they can support you for life. Anything, just call them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the whole point of this is to basically break this thing lah. The whole point of this sandwich generation. So there's this NTUC era. I'm not sure you all seen it before. So they call it the last sandwich generation. So basically it's to break this thing up lah. So actually there's a survey done by them, right, that says that 94% of the parents, right, actually are experiencing this sandwich generation thing. So do you all think you all will experience or is going to experience this in the future?
I think I'm lucky because I would count myself as part of the 5% that may not experience it. I mean, currently I'm not seeing anybody. Okay, I'm not seeing anybody, and I don't know if I'll have kids, but I do foresee in the future that if I do have kids, based on the conversations I have with my parents, especially my dad, it does seem that he doesn't rely on me for retirement. I think at this point I also want to share, when I first started working, I told my dad I will take over all the insurance plans that he bought for me, and it was through that transferring process that I realized, like, wow, he really took care of the family finances, because it's the sole breadwinner. I saw, you know, the amount of time and effort he took to plan for us, and I suppose for himself as well, way back when me and my brother were just babies. And now that I've taken it over, I really appreciate that planning that he used to do for me, and I hope that it will be worthwhile lah, you know, for his own retirement as well. Yeah, so when I first started working, I told him I will take it over, and then I asked him if he wanted me to give him an allowance. So I did have that very open communication, although it wasn't like a sit down like this. It was like a 擦肩而过, like, oh, by the way, by the way, I want to give you money, how much you want? Then he told me something which was, you know, it's my responsibility to bring you up. I'm not expecting you to give me anything. And he was still working at that time. So he said, no, it's fine. You just give mommy what she needs, because my mom's a housewife. So I was like, okay, I'm very, very grateful. But on the side, I spoke to my grandma about it, and she told me, like, no, you just set aside anyways. And if one day he needs the money, you have that amount to readily give it to him lah. So I think that was the advice that I took from my grandma. And now I'm just, you know, cautiously setting aside that amount of money, so that in any case I will still already have that amount for him lah. Yeah.
Okay, it is like a spare amount that you actually set aside.
Yes, correct. Okay. I mean, I would have given it to him, but since he said no, he doesn't need it now, then I'll just stash it away first, so that in any
emergency or in case,
correct.
that kind.
Yeah.
Okay, what about you? Do you talk to your parents about it?
I think my parents definitely not very well to do that. So definitely they'll support. But I got 2 elder sisters, so I think it all works out fine, I guess, because we got 3% to support them lah. So definitely yes lah, and I think that we should just break this up, because we wouldn't want to burden our future generation also lah, with all these financial liabilities or anything that you have. So you should basically plan for yourself. Yeah. Ivan, what do you think?
Wow. Okay, so I think I'm the same. Because I did had a conversation with my parents. Then like everybody knows, right? Cause I'm gay, so I will not have a kid anyway. So can adopt or surrogate. Yeah. So I most likely will take my nephew as on my own lah. Correct. So that will be my next generation. But I think not so much of a liability or a burden in that sense, right? But I think I did had a talk with my mom about it. Then, cause I am living actually with my grandmother, so she actually my mom is actually taking care of my grandmother. So she did mention to me that she would want to be the last person to actually be taking care of my grandmother and herself, so that I don't have to be burdened with the responsibility also as well of the household lah. Yeah, in that sense. So, but you know, as in I think like I'm part traditional part open modern, right? So in my mind it's still like, oh, you know, like, but she raised me
Yeah.
you know, like you will have that kind of like
Filial.
yeah, filial. So in that sense of filial, right, you will think that like, okay, I better provide my parents with some money or retirement fund that, you know, like you can actually provide for your for your family lah. So in that sense, I don't know where is the clear line of like, you know, division of like, oh, are you the last sandwich generation, or are you like having the filial thing that, you know, you have to look after your parents, that kind.
I think it's the Asian mindset that we talk about again. It's like, you know, because we have been taught to be filial to our parents and all the Confucian values, right? So there is that inbuilt sense of I need to take care, and this taking care is very very direct. It's like money. There's nothing else that we can take care, because I mean, if you talk about like house, if you talk about food, it all comes from money.
True.
Money is a love language in an Asian family.
Yes, it is, and I think especially when I think when it starts all the way when you mention about giving money allowance, I think that was the point that I think the sense of responsibility and the sense of, I would say burden, but the sense of like, oh, okay, I need to start providing for my family already.
Yeah.
It really naturally just come to you. So my parents, as in my parents and I had a very, I would say not distance, but pretty, we don't really talk about money, in a family lah, very out. So in that sense, that I think even for money allowance or even for retirement, it had to be a very, I would say, forced discussion, but really, okay, let's sit down and talk about it openly. Because I think they are not very direct person, or they like, oh, okay, no need, but
It's
then
a very harsh topic.
yes,
right?
correct.
My mother just asked me for money and I start working. Eh, 做工了 right? Okay, 加油. Cause my sisters, my elder sisters already started giving when they are working.
She's just like,
so it's the
when
standard
is it
the
time
retirement
for you?
plan mature already. Start to pay out already. So she straight asked me, and I also expected it to pay already lah.
Immediately when you start your first job, when you get your
Immediately
first,
take graduation photo.
yeah.
She happiest and not me. My mother is the happiest, not me.
You see when the graduate photo, right, the mother is beaming with joy.
Yeah, finally.
I throw the hat, but she also throw the hat. Yeah, so it was an okay thing. It's not that I don't want to give her, but it's a established thing already for Asian families.
Yeah.
But from what I know, right, Angmo countries, right, or Angmo families, right, they don't really care on it. The kids just move out when they are 17, 18, right, and then they just live on their own one. So I really think it's an Asian thing, right. So I think that Angmo countries, right, if you are there, right, if you want to migrate, right, you can actually go to Angmo countries, right. If you don't want to be part of this sandwich generation thing, yeah.
But do you think that the sandwich generation would then migrate into that kind of culture? Because like, since we are talking about last sandwich generation, right? So let's say we are the last sandwich generation. Do you think that our future will actually be thinking of that mindset of like, hey, actually, as and when I can leave the house, or as and when I actually don't need to actually have the burden of providing for my parents?
Like what? Like we should move out and migrate.
Your kids lah. Let's say your kids. Yeah. Not you. Yeah.
My kids. Okay, so basically we are trying to break this curse. So actually you should do your own planning so that you don't need to rely on kids. So even if your kids want to move out, right, I think it's okay.
It doesn't affect
it
you.
doesn't really affect you.
But I would feel a bit sian, like 你没有心 to 孝顺
So you are still
yeah, right? Oh no. I won't collect, I won't force, but if you do, I mean, if my future kids do give me, I will feel very touched.
Right.
I'll be like,
Yeah.
oh,
Like
you
giving
included
back,
me into your planning, your finances, and I am important in that sense. But obviously, if let's say circumstances don't allow it, and you know, my future kids tell me like, hey, mommy, I want to give you, but you know my situation now, then that's fine with me. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it still boils down to Asian
I guess,
culture.
yeah.
Which I think is nothing wrong with it. It's just how we are brought up and then how we
Yeah.
pass down to the future generation. So if you are in this sandwich generation, right, what are some of the things that we can do, right, to solve this thing, or how can we avoid it? Any thoughts?
As the middle patty, or
as the middle patty,
parents in future?
let's talk about middle patty
Okay.
now first.
Yeah.
So what do you think? How can we solve this?
Wow, that's a tough question. What can I? That's impromptu tough question. Well, how can you solve? Okay, to be honest, right? Then I think what I did, I would actually sit down with my parents
Yeah.
to actually have a discussion with them. I think which then I think I brought up a topic which with my parents. My parents suddenly came to my room and then asked me about CPF. And then start withdrawing money, you know, like, because she can start withdrawing money.
Yeah.
Already. So she asked me how much should she withdraw, whether should she put in everything. Then that was when I decided, you know, like, okay, maybe it's time to actually move the conversation on and say that, okay, since you are now going to your 60s already,
Yeah.
right? What is the next step of action, and what's for grandma, and what's for us, what's for the house and everything. So then I think it's a very good conversation starter in that sense. I think in practical sense, right, then I think for our parents, we need to plan it out for them lah. If let's say they do or don't have anything, then what is needed on our
Yeah.
side and how can we actually provide for them?
Yeah.
I think then there needs to be I would say not say do and don't, but it's more of like what you have and what you don't have, and what is the gap that we have, and then how can we actually help you in
Yeah.
that sense.
Agree.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's true because a lot of parents, right, they actually don't really do much planning on. So maybe they got like stash of money sitting in their bank, all this, right? You can actually go and help them out and actually like work out something for them, either a retirement plan or whatever. Better off than putting into like just banks.
Actually, I have. So my so last year, you know, COVID period, right? So my mom used my name and my grandmother's name to put in the fixed D.
Use your name and your grandmother's
Why
name.
though?
Because I think it's for my grandmother, right? If let's say you're more than 70 or anything,
cannot.
banks will actually give you a preferential
Preferential
rate,
rate.
higher rate.
Ah.
Then I had DBS multiplier also as well. So I think they will give you a slightly higher rate as well
For parking all your money in
for
the
the parking
same
on the
bank.
same
Yeah.
bank and an FD thing, correct. So then again, she did park like a sum of money under me, which is going to expire this year, like going to renew this year. So then I think the conversation will then have to bring out of like, okay, you have this sum of money, or you have like, I know that she have various FD located around, right? So you cannot be possibly always storing your money in the FD.
Yeah.
So what is the next plan of action? Then I think it is needed that
Yeah.
time. Yeah.
I think for me, actually my dad doesn't like to talk about money also, like a very typical Asian father, right? But for me, because like what Jian Wei said, I'm a bit more sensitive with money, right? So I want to talk about it. So I did tell him, you know, some of the feelings I have for money. So certain things like, oh, you know, I realized like my habit of, you know, scrimping and saving every single cent, how I feel about that and what I thought became me, you know, through the growing up process. And also because my brother is diagnosed with a special needs, which means that I guess my sandwich will come then and there. I did tell him a lot of things like, what about this house? You know, beyond just the everyday spending, what's going to happen to this house? Where will my brother live, you know, in the future when both you and mom will not be here anymore? You know, if I move out, if I either marry out and buy my own house, then who's going to be the guardian of this house? So a lot of things I had to take the initiative to speak with him about it. And luckily, even though he doesn't initiate it, he does respond. And he does it in a very reassuring way, because I guess I'm also a bit of a worrywart, so he can tell. So he will tell me like, okay, even though I'm not going to share all my retirement plans with you, you know, what is going to happen with my brother, the house, money and everything, I do have that sense that, okay, I think I should trust him, because he has planned for me and my brother since young, right? So I just have to let go and trust him, even though I don't think that's an advice I'll give, depending on the circumstances of every parent lah. Yeah, but in my case, I guess it works. And yeah, I mean, I now also have that reassurance that whenever I do face any financial decisions, even like, you know, previously I was talking to Jian Wei about hospitalization rider, all that, I am able to go to him and he's able to give me an advice lor. Yeah.
Alright, so just now we are talking about some of the ways that you can solve this, right? So let's talk about maybe as a middle generation, right? Maybe you can start like planning earlier for your kids. So next time, right, if your kids need anything, right, you can actually have a fund for them lah. So actually thoughts about planning for your kids early, like when should you start, or when should you start looking into these kind of things?
Well, then I think we should ask you that question.
Ask me.
You're the most
You're the most qualified person out of both of us to answer.
out of three of us.
Yeah, out of three of us.
Sure. Okay, I think if you want to plan, right, it's as early as possible. Okay, I feel that as long as you are ready to settle down, right, almost ready to settle down, right, I think you can have this conversation really. So you can talk to your partner, right, and then have this conversation about having kids lah, and then having set aside an amount for kids, which I haven't done it yet. Because about there, maybe reaching soon, yeah. But when you're about there, I think you should start talking about it.
Okay.
Then my question is that because kids and retirement, it's always a fighting thing, right? And I mean, logically, it's always like, okay, don't touch your retirement fund to supplement your children's education, etc., right? Is that even practical? I mean, logically, it makes sense. Like, that is for strictly for retirement, and if you touch it, it will affect your quality of life after that, right? But is it actually achievable?
Okay, my thoughts is right, if you are, it really boils down to your lifestyle. So if you want to have kids, right, then looking at your income, right, maybe you cannot have that desired kind of lifestyle you want. So maybe you need to cut down a lot on expenses or eating out and stuff like that lah. So I feel that basically if you work out things properly, right, you can basically not touch your retirement fund and then have enough to fund for your kids. Or if you don't want, right, another way, right, is you don't have kids.
Yeah.
I think that's the easy way out lah. Not say easy way out, but if you don't have kids, right, then you can have
You don't
a
have to
better
bear
lifestyle.
that cost of having kids.
Yeah, so you have to look at your income also lah, like how much you can bring in the next 30, 40 years, and then see whether it makes sense for you to have kids or not. So I think some of them, like for example my sisters, right, some of them don't want to have kids.
Yeah.
So they are actually quite comfortable lah, and then they can afford a decent lifestyle.
So is there a certain income level that you reach that you say, okay, below this, right, actually it's not viable to have kids, and then above this is like, okay, I can consider.
Okay, I don't think there's a fixed income. It's basically back to the lifestyle thing.
Yeah.
So if you want to live like a king, right, you want to eat out, you want to drive, you want to live in condo, right, then maybe you need to hit like 10k per month and above, right, to have all these lah.
Yeah, to have it all.
Yeah, because my parents did it without having a very high income.
Yeah.
And then they got 3 kids, but that's the thing. So they end up with this sandwich generation thing. Yeah. So basically you want to plan properly in terms of you have enough for kids and you have enough for yourself. Then you can have your kids. Yeah. So in detailed numbers you can have another session on that.
Yeah.
Well, I think touching on that topic, right, then I think it's really not just two priorities, but I think it's one more added because if let's say a sandwich generation like us, right, beside our own retirement that we want to plan well, our kids, we have to think of our parents' retirement as well. So it really have to be balanced out in that sense that, you know, while providing for your parents' retirement, if let's say you have to do that, you don't want to sacrifice your own retirement, then the cycle will begin again, you know, in that sense.
Yeah.
So I think not at the current moment, really to plan out what you need in the long future lah.
And also, I think now with the COVID situation and everything, right, a lot of parents are considering taking their kids out of daycare and then putting them at their grandparents. Then that whole cycle comes back even more strongly because then your parents are providing you a service. So should you then pay for them for that service? Then it's like, okay, should I give you more money for taking care of my kids and etc. etc. So this tree, right, is really like stuck together.
Yes, I think there's no like a detailed way of how to separate it out. But I think it's more of like how, like what Jian mentioned, it's really more of like how you want your life to be in the future itself. And then, as I think like in the future, it will not be as strong as how we view like our parents taking care of our kids in that sense. So if let's say our kid have kid again, then we are the grandparents, right? We are ready for our own retirement and then not dependent on our kids. And then even though if let's say a grandkid were to come and stay with us, right, I think it wouldn't really have that much of an impact again on our kids lah.
Debatable.
Back to differ.
Correct.
Any thoughts?
Because I feel like, I mean, not my own grandparents per se, but I have seen, you know, maybe my colleagues who are grandparents already, they'll say like, 他们生孩子他们的事不要叫我照顾 you know, or for example, if let's say I want to continue working, not to earn money but to, you know, spend the time active retirement, then 你要叫我照顾你的孩子 then 你在耽误我的 retirement. You get what I mean? So, and then if let's say I work, let's say I pay 1.5, 2k, that's enough, right, for someone who's retired. How much are you gonna pay for my services to take care of your kid? Then it's like choosing between two career options, you know? And like if I go out, it's true that I can earn more money, but this is my grandchild, this is
family.
Correct. So it all comes back to, I don't know if it's the Asian society thinking again, or just being in Singapore, the cost of living is also quite high, with added risk of COVID, with choosing a good childcare or infant care or daycare for your kids. That's also something that everybody have to consider lah. Yeah.
Okay. What if next time your kids, right, is the 那些不孝子 kind?
Yeah.
What if something like that? Because things like this really happens. If you go and look around, right? So what if let's say not so jialat, let's say not say 不孝子, let's say they don't want to give allowance, or they just don't really want to be like part of your retirement plan. So what do you think I will do?
If she has an open communication with me to say like, hey, I'm saving for a house, I want to start my own business, I want to study masters, etc. Is it okay I don't give you money? Then we can work out that sort of agreement. But if it's like I'm angry with my mom, she didn't even provide that well for me, I don't, why should I give? Then there is a difference in the reason or the intention why the allowance is not given. But I hope we don't get to that stage lah. Yeah.
But what if they just want a better lifestyle for them, so they want to spend it themselves instead of?
But giving me is not that much. It will not like help you buy a car if you don't give me,
Okay, so the amount doesn't matter lah, as long as they give you.
There's that.
Yes,
correct.
Okay.
That sincerity
It's
to
true
give a token sum. I'm not even saying like you must give like 30% or whatever. Yeah.
So it's 意思 lah, basically.
Yes.
I think it's a thought.
correct. It's a thought
It's a thought that counts, and it's the intention of like, I want to give you. It's really that matters. I think whether you give like 100, 200 or what, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
But I really have the same thinking. I really have the same thinking. I don't know whether is it like we are too ingrained into like the Asian culture, or like really we are like brought up in this manner of like how we view money or how we view our kids should be. But I really think that like it's the thought that really matters a lot.
Yeah.
Like you just giving me. I really don't depend on your money.
Yeah.
Like how much you give, it really doesn't like suffice how much I get. Yeah, but then ultimately I think it's really you just giving me.
Yeah.
Then that's okay.
Yeah.
To me, I think I'm okay. I don't need it. I hope my future kid don't watch this.
Oh,
But I think I'm okay in
I will
general.
send them.
so is your girlfriend okay with it?
I don't know. I think she won't be okay. Maybe she wants some like retirement income from it. But I think I'm okay.
But also because she's the one who birthed them.
Okay.
For 9 months, going through all the pain. It's like, I go through all that and I don't get even a little bit. Yeah, not even a little bit. Then it's like, okay, yeah.
Okay, so actually I was just thinking of like the retirement and our parents, right? And then talking about your girlfriend, right? So will you actually share with your girlfriend your retirement plans about your parents, or like like have an open communication with like, hey, okay, so this is what I'm thinking to do for my parents. Will you have a conversation with that with your other half?
I think have lah in general, but it doesn't need to be. It's nothing big lah. It's not like you give them like a few thousands or something, right? Yeah. So it's just I gotta tell them lah. I give this amount to my parents. I think that's about it.
Not like a percent, right? You tell the actual amount, right?
Yeah. So I think it's okay. I think there's no big deal about that.
I think your situation is good because you are able to give, and the amount that you give is something your parents are also okay with. I have dated some guys before that they will tell me like, my mom wants this amount, and it's like, let's say 4 figure, and obviously we're earning 4 figure also, right? Then there will be a strife, and then on my end I'll be like, okay, if I were to settle down with this guy, this problem and issue will also fall on me, even though currently my dad doesn't expect an amount, and even if I do give him an amount, it's like a token amount, right? But if I were to marry into another family, then that becomes my problem. Whatever financial, emotional, when 2 families become one, that problem will be my problem also. So I think it is important, even before you are thinking of settle down, all these issues you should start taking note and then talking about it already. Yeah, like, hey, that time you told me your mom wants this, will that be an issue for us if we were to settle down, and how will we work out this problem?
So what if your future date, right, is very like 孝顺 that kind one, so like give parents a lot of money, will it affect you? Like,
it depends on the parents. Is the parents demanding that amount? And then if let's say they are, then I would say, okay, it's fine if you give them. Then what about your future generation? Yeah, so that it's always a very fluid and open conversation. If let's say if out of his own filial piety he wants to give 50%, but actually the parents don't need, then the parents say like, hey, actually all this money that you've been giving me, I've been saving, I give you back.
That one not bad. That one very good.
Exactly. So if it's like 他自己要给 and the parents like, okay, fine, like, let me just accept it, then to me it's fine. But if the parents say like, no, this is for me, I'm not living, give me means give me already, then that will be another conversation to go on with lah.
Actually, I have friends' parents, right, that they very bad at money management. So actually, my friend would prefer that they just keep the money for themselves and then they do something for their parents.
Correct. Like you need, then I fork out.
So they'll do like some retirement plan for their parents.
Yeah.
So I would say depends on your parents also. If your
Yeah.
parents are savvy, they know what to do with the money, then yes, like, if not, maybe it's better off you parking it with yourself and then help them do some planning for them instead.
Actually, that was what I was thinking also. So I was thinking like, is it better if, let's say, you actually start something for your parents rather than to give them that large amount of money instead?
Or top up to their CPF.
Top up to their, yeah, correct. So I think a main point of like this whole sandwich generation, or last sandwich generation, right, is to really have an open conversation with your parents, and then to tell them that, like, you hope that you don't want to burden your kids in the future, but you want to stop it there, like, you want to stop it there. So I think it's to really have a open conversation with parents and about how money is managed, or how you can actually provide for their retirement and everything else.
Yeah.
Because you still have to think of your own retirement and your children as well.
Yeah. I think it's for our generation also. So we want to know that we cannot rely on kids for our retirement. So we need to settle our own stuff basically as early as
it's
possible.
a nice thought to have, and I'm sure it is for our parents also. Like, I have 3 kids, I have 2 kids. Like, next time when they graduate, wow, I will be able to enjoy life, etc. But for us, it's like, okay, we were once in that shoe, so we also have to take steps now, to plan for our future lah. Yeah.
Hello. So I guess that's all for today's episode.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thanks, Alison, for
Thank
coming
you
down
so
today.
much.
Thank you, Alison, for sharing with us. So if you like our episode, do like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and watch our next episode next week.
And follow her podcast.
And yes, follow our podcast too.
Alison with the EH.
Yeah.
So do go and follow her and listen to her podcast, and we will see you soon. Bye.